So I got something super cool for you today on Wisdom Waves, something that literally keeps me up at night sometimes. You know how we spent, 12 years in school learning all this stuff, but somehow never learned how to actually manage our money?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We learned the Pythagorean theorem and how to dissect frogs, but nobody thought to teach us what a credit score actually is or, how interest rates work.
Right? I mean, I remember getting my first credit card in college and just completely messing it up because I had no idea what I was doing. Do you know what I mean?
I totally do. And the thing is, well, it's not just us. Most people leave high school with virtually zero understanding of banking, credit, debits, or how to manage their financial lives. It's like we're prepared for these academic challenges, but not the practical money challenges that, frankly, impact everyone's life every single day.
So that's exactly what we're diving into today. Why don't schools teach us this essential life skill? Is it an oversight, or is there something deeper going on? Because honestly, this disconnect between what we learn and what we need to know is pretty shocking. You know what's crazy to me, Ted? I was thinking about this the other day. We spent 4 years learning algebra, which, don't get me wrong, has its place, but literally zero time on how to balance a checkbook or understand loan terms. That's kind of messed up, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when you really look at it, the contrast is pretty stark. We're taught these traditional subjects, literature, science, history, but practical financial skills? Nope, not even the basics, really.
I was reading this study from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority that said something like 66% of Americans couldn't pass a basic financial literacy test, 2/3 of adults. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's genuinely shocking. And you know what's even worse? About 53% of adults are actually stressed about their finances regularly. And a lot of that stress comes from just not understanding how these systems work in the first place. They never learned the foundations.
So why is this happening? I mean, why don't schools prioritize this stuff that we actually need every single day of our adult lives?
Well, I think there are a few things going on here. First, there's this long-standing belief that schools should focus on, academic knowledge rather than practical life skills, as if understanding compound interest isn't academic somehow.
Right. And I wonder if there's also this assumption that parents will teach these things. But how can parents teach something they might not understand themselves?
Exactly. It's this cycle of financial illiteracy. Parents who weren't taught don't teach their kids, and schools just keep focusing on traditional subjects because that's what's always been done. And honestly, there's also the fact that most teachers themselves weren't trained to teach financial concepts.
Do you think there's something more intentional going on? Do banks and credit card companies actually benefit from us not knowing this stuff?
That's the question a lot of people are asking. If consumers understood exactly how interest compounds or how credit scores actually work, would they make different decisions? Probably. And some of those decisions might not be as profitable for financial institutions. Not saying it's a conspiracy, but follow the money, as they say.
That's something to think about. So we've got curriculum limitations, teacher training gaps, and maybe even some systemic incentives all working against financial education in schools?
Yeah, and add to that the fact that curriculum decisions are often made at state or district levels where there's already intense competition for classroom time. Every subject is fighting for those precious minutes, and financial literacy just hasn't made the cut in most places.
So, Ted, let's talk about what actually happens when people don't understand these financial basics. Because the consequences are pretty serious, right?
They absolutely are. And this is something I think about a lot. When people don't understand banking, credit, and debt, they end up in these really difficult situations that can follow them for years, sometimes decades.
Like what? Can you give me some examples of how this plays out in real life?
Sure. So one of the biggest issues I see is people getting trapped in these debt cycles. Like someone takes out a credit card without understanding how interest works, and they think, oh, I'll just pay the minimum payment, not realizing that's exactly what the credit card companies want. And then they're suddenly paying 3 or 4 times what they originally borrowed.
Yes, I had a friend who did that in college. She bought a $500 laptop and ended up paying almost $2,000 for it because she only made minimum payments for years.
Exactly that. And it's not because people are irresponsible or don't care. It's literally because no one taught them how compounding interest actually works. And what's even worse is that these mistakes can destroy your credit score, which then affects everything else.
Wait, so bad credit doesn't just mean you can't get another credit card, right? It's bigger than that.
So much bigger. A poor credit score means you'll pay higher interest rates on everything: car loans, mortgages. Some employers even check credit before hiring. Landlords check before renting to you. It's like this invisible barrier that keeps following you around.
That seems so unfair, though, especially when people aren't even taught how this stuff works in the first place.
Right? And then there are these predatory lenders who basically target financially illiterate people. Things like payday loans with 400% interest rates, or those buy here, pay here car lots charging double what a car is worth because they know their customers don't understand how to calculate the true cost.
I've seen those. They're always in lower-income neighborhoods, too, which feels intentional.
It is intentional. They specifically target people who didn't get financial education. And it creates this vicious cycle where people who start with less money make decisions that cost them more money because they weren't taught the rules of the game.
So, financial illiteracy essentially becomes this tax on being poor?
That's actually a perfect way to put it. It's a tax on not knowing. I've seen people lose their homes because they signed adjustable rate mortgages without understanding that their payments could suddenly jump by hundreds of dollars. Or people who get into those rent-to-own schemes for appliances where they end up paying 3 times retail price.
And all this could be prevented with just some basic education, right?
Absolutely. Just understanding how interest works, what a credit score is and how it's calculated, the difference between good debt and bad debt. These aren't complicated concepts, but they're life-changing when you know them. And the sad thing is, many people don't learn until after they've already made major mistakes.
So, this is all really eye-opening. But I've got to ask why. Why don't schools teach this stuff in the first place? It seems like such a massive oversight.
You know, I've thought about this a lot, and there are several factors at play here. I think the most obvious one is just curriculum limitations. Like, schools are already cramming so much into those standardized tests and state requirements. There's this constant pressure to improve math scores, reading scores, science scores.
Right? And financial literacy doesn't show up on those standardized tests that schools are judged by.
Exactly. It's not being measured, so it's not being prioritized. And you know how education works. What gets tested gets taught. School systems are designed around these very specific academic metrics, and life skills like understanding a mortgage just don't factor into those metrics.
I've also heard people say that schools assume parents will teach kids about money. Is that part of it too?
Oh, absolutely. There's this assumption that financial education happens at home. But here's the problem with that thinking. Many parents themselves don't understand these concepts. Like, how can you teach your kid about credit utilization ratios if you've never learned about them yourself?
That's such a good point. It creates this generational knowledge gap, doesn't it?
It really does. Financial literacy, or illiteracy, tends to be passed down. And what we're seeing is that many families have been operating with limited financial knowledge for generations. So this idea that parents will handle it, it perpetuates the problem.
What about teacher training? I'm guessing most teachers don't have backgrounds in finance either, right?
Right. Most education degrees don't include financial literacy training. So even if schools wanted to add it to the curriculum tomorrow, they'd face this challenge of who's qualified to teach it. Many teachers would tell you they don't feel comfortable teaching financial concepts they're unsure about themselves.
Okay, but I have to ask about the elephant in the room. Is there maybe a more controversial reason? Like, do some institutions actually benefit from people not understanding this stuff?
Well, this is where it gets complicated. I don't think there's some evil mastermind plotting to keep people financially ignorant, but there are certainly entities that profit from financial illiteracy. Credit card companies make billions from interest and late fees paid by people who don't fully understand the terms.
And those payday loan places we mentioned.
Exactly. The entire business model of some financial products depends on consumers not doing the math correctly or not understanding the long-term implications. And let's be honest, an informed consumer is probably going to be a more cautious consumer.
So there's not really an incentive for these big financial institutions to push for better financial education.
Not really, no. And I think there's also this subtle class element to it. Historically, certain financial knowledge has been kept within wealthy families and communities. Information about investing, building wealth, that wasn't considered essential knowledge for everyone.
That's pretty disturbing when you think about it.
It is. And while I don't think it's an active conspiracy, I do think there's a systemic comfort with keeping the financial system complicated and slightly opaque, because complexity benefits the experts and institutions who navigate it professionally.
So between curriculum constraints, the assumption parents will teach it, unprepared teachers, and these potential systemic benefits to keeping people uninformed, we've got quite a perfect storm.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. A perfect storm that leaves most young people completely unprepared for the financial realities of adulthood.
So, given all these barriers, are there actually places where financial education is being done right? I'm curious if there are any success stories we can learn from.
Actually, there are some really encouraging examples out there, like Australia has this nationwide program called Money Smart Teaching that's been pretty remarkable. They've integrated financial literacy across different subjects, and they provide, specialized training for teachers.
Really? How does that work in practice?
So they'll take something like math class, and instead of just abstract problems, they'll have students calculate compound interest on loans or analyze credit card statements. It's practical application of math that kids will actually use in real life.
That's brilliant. Are there other countries doing similar things?
Yeah, Singapore has actually made financial literacy a core part of their curriculum for years. And Japan, too. They start teaching kids about money management in elementary school. And what's interesting is that these countries tend to have higher savings rates and lower personal debt levels overall.
What about here in the U.S.? Any bright spots?
There are definitely some promising initiatives. States like Utah, Virginia, and Missouri have started requiring personal finance courses for high school graduation. And there's this program called Next Gen Personal Finance that's providing free curriculum and teacher training to thousands of schools.
That sounds promising. But what if your school doesn't offer anything like this? What can parents or even young adults do to educate themselves?
Well, there are tons of resources out there now. There are some really accessible books like I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi or Get Good with Money by Tiffany Elish. They break down financial concepts in plain language.
Oh, and I guess there are podcasts too, right? Besides Wisdom Waves, of course.
Right. Podcasts like How to Money or Bigger Pockets Money are great for beginners. And there are free courses online through Khan Academy that cover everything from basic banking to investing.
What about apps? I feel like there must be some good ones out there.
Absolutely. Apps like Mint or YNAB, You Need a Budget, are great for learning budgeting. And there are even some gamified apps like Financial Football that teach kids financial concepts through games. And platforms like Greenlight allow parents to give kids prepaid debit cards with controls and learning tools built in.
So we're saying people shouldn't just wait for schools to catch up? They need to be proactive?
Exactly. While we advocate for better financial education in schools, we can't just wait around. Parents can start teaching kids with allowances and savings accounts. Young adults can educate themselves. Financial literacy is too important to outsource completely to our education system, especially when it's clearly falling short.
Are there community resources too? Like, I've heard some credit unions offer workshops and things.
Yes. Many credit unions and even some banks offer free financial literacy workshops. Public libraries often host financial education events. And organizations like Junior Achievement bring financial education programs directly into classrooms.
So basically, the resources are out there if people know to look for them?
Exactly. The information exists, but you have to actively seek it out, And that's really the problem. Financial education should be the default, not something only available to those who already recognize its importance.
So, what can people actually do to change this situation? I mean, is there a way for regular people to, advocate for better financial education in their kids' schools?
There is, and it's actually more straightforward than many people think. The first step is to simply attend school board meetings, which are, and this is important, open to the public. You don't even need to have kids in the school system to attend these meetings and voice your concerns.
That's a great point. I feel like a lot of people don't realize they can just show up to those meetings.
Exactly. And when you do show up, come prepared with specific requests, like you might suggest adding an elective course on personal finance or incorporating financial literacy into existing math classes. Having concrete suggestions makes it easier for school administrators to take action.
What about joining the PTA? Is that another way to have influence?
Absolutely. Parent-teacher associations have real influence on curriculum decisions. By joining your local PTA, you can form coalitions with other parents who share your concerns about financial education. There's power in numbers, you know what I mean?
I've also heard about parents bringing in guest speakers. Is that something that works?
That's actually a fantastic approach. Many financial professionals, bankers, financial advisors, even accountants, are often willing to volunteer their time to speak with students. You could coordinate with teachers to bring these experts in for special sessions on banking, credit, or budgeting.
What about like at home, for parents who want to supplement whatever is or isn't being taught at school?
Well, there are so many ways to teach kids about money at home. One approach is to give kids an allowance and help them divide it into spending, saving, and giving categories. Even young children can grasp these concepts when they're handling real money.
Are there games or activities that make it fun?
Oh, tons! Board games like Monopoly actually teach fundamental concepts about money management. For teenagers, there are simulations like Stock Market Game, where they can practice investing with play money. And for younger kids, even setting up a pretend store at home can teach basic concepts of exchange and value.
What about teenagers? They seem like, well, a tougher audience sometimes.
With teens, it's all about relevance and real-world application. Consider helping them open their first checking account and walking them through how it works. Some parents even add their teenagers as authorized users on credit cards with strict limits to help them build credit responsibly under supervision.
These are such practical ideas, but what if someone doesn't have kids? Can they still help with this issue?
Definitely. You can advocate for financial literacy programs at community centers or libraries. You can support organizations that promote financial education or even consider volunteering with groups like Junior Achievement that bring financial lessons into classrooms. Everyone can play a role in solving this problem.
So, as we're wrapping up today's episode, I just wanted to circle back to the big question we started with. Why don't schools teach us about banking, credit, and all that practical money stuff?
You know, I think it really comes down to priorities, right? Our education system was designed in a different era, and it just hasn't caught up with the financial complexities that people face today. The consequences of this gap are, well, they're pretty serious.
Totally. I mean, when I think about how many people are struggling with debt or making really bad financial decisions just because nobody ever taught them the basics, that's kind of heartbreaking.
It is. And what makes it even more frustrating is that financial literacy isn't actually that difficult to teach. Like the basic principles of saving, understanding interest, managing credit, these aren't complex theoretical concepts. They're practical skills that everyone needs.
I'm curious, did your school teach you anything about personal finance? Because mine sure didn't.
Barely anything, to be honest. I learned how to calculate compound interest in math class, but nobody ever explained why that mattered for my future. You know what I mean? The practical applications were just missing completely.
Well, we'd love to hear from our Wisdom Waves listeners about this. Did your school teach you about money, or did you have to figure it all out the hard way?
Yes. And if you've got kids, what are you doing to fill this gap? Are there topics related to financial literacy that you'd like us to cover in future episodes?
Let us know in the comments below. Please like and share among your friends and family. We seriously read everything you guys send, and your suggestions often become our favorite episodes.
And remember, even if the education system hasn't caught up yet, there are so many resources out there now. Books, podcasts like this one, online courses, many of them completely free. Financial literacy is absolutely something you can teach yourself.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your money. Thanks so much for joining us on today's Wisdom Waves. We'll catch you next week for another conversation that matters.